The Overwatch Classic game mode is out early, seemingly, tomorrow. Launch trailer came out today announcing a 6v6 version of the game, as well as a return to a long list of wacky abilities from yesteryear. Scatter Arrow, Torbjorn throwing armor packs, mass res, multi-tank, Bastion repairs himself, and Torbjorn can get play of the game while being in spawn. There's been a lot of games that have been returning to the classic, simpler gameplay from back in the day, and Overwatch, of course, is trying to cash in on this momentum with an opportunity to give us back some of the most annoying things in the history of the game. But the thing that stands out most to me in this trailer, why are Roadhog and D.Va dating? First of all, is this the tank synergy we're really looking forward to? And didn't she have a crush on Bob? It's okay, I understand. I too resist the urge to be attracted to a good whole hog. Okay, 6v6, no limits. It's a bit unclear where this fits into the previously scheduled testing to actually properly put 6v6 in the game. This seems more like a wacky mode with 6v6 and classic abilities, whereas, as they outlined in the blog post, they have more serious test environments, maybe without some of these abilities that they don't actually intend to put back. Like Torbjorn's permanent turret that he can upgrade, mass res, Symmetra with multiple sentries, etc., etc. That instead is going to be coming next season. However, we did also just have the first experimental card testing a new format, and I want to review that as well. But first, let's just talk about Overwatch Classic. The cool thing about them bringing this back is there's going to be a big percentage of the active player base that never played using any of these abilities. It gives a lot of context to some of the, let's say, bad theory crafting that people have, not really understanding the ramifications of some of the things they ask for. Oddly enough, in the classic era of the game, the heroes were far more boom or bust. Over time, they got redesigned to be much more streamlined, but a character like Torbjorn was maybe closer to like a Dota techie. As in, he had a gimmicky playstyle where he gave his teammates armor and permanently put a turret down that couldn't move. In the middle era of the game, they really tried to make all of the heroes more flexible, so Symmetra could actively put her teleporter throughout the map. Torbjorn was more mobile and brawly as opposed to stationary. Over time, all of the heroes got a little bit more homogenous so that the game wasn't so punishing based on what you picked, which is an odd thing to be saying considering our hyper-competitive audience in Overwatch 2 thinks the opposite is the case, that the current version is far more punishing on who you pick, which I don't think will be the consensus opinion after all of these tests run their course, especially since wonderful videos like Spylo's I tested 6v6 to prove everyone wrong didn't actually prove any of my core premises wrong. In fact, substantiated them with some of the best arguments and evidence I've ever seen on the subject. I mean, that was refreshing. But some of the core takeaways from that video is that heroes in 6v6 are far more polarized in their effect, as in they either do far more or far less. Your hero composition matters far more in your ability to even take or engage in space, and that's the entire premise of why I dislike the format altogether. But I need not get what I have always wanted in order to make the game succeed in any way that the game wants to succeed. I'd be happy to see it. However, I think the community would need to really change their tune on their expectations, because the launch era of the game, where I was indeed part of the content creators around in 2016, there's few of us now, but the player base that played that version of Overwatch had a very different perspective on it. If you scroll through the comment section of any Overwatch video today, there will be a long list of meta theory crafting, certitude that they know the true way to balance Overwatch. Whereas in the launch era of the game, where this Overwatch Classic actually lived in, the player base was far more casual, much more open-minded to crazy experimentation, and just less try-hard in general. Believe it or not, we had a cultural problem within the game that players didn't try hard enough. Now we're worried about them being too sweaty. I do think there's a way to make either version of the game the best version of itself, but you can't split the baby. You can't expect a competitively balanced game where all the heroes get good playtime and also expect wacky, crazy, over-the-top abilities with a huge diversity of playsets. All right, now I want to switch to talking about the more recent open queue format that they called Min 2 Max 1, or as I like to call it, Short Straw, because if you pick last, you might end up on a role you didn't want as the solo player as either tank, DPS, or support. This mode kind of sucked. And it's funny because as I read the feedback on it online, a lot of the pro 6v6 crowd don't like it because they state that if you left the tank cooldowns the same but just lowered the health, they're still radically overpowered. making DPS quote-unquote useless. I have a very different experience, especially if you watch the gameplay in the background. I think you'll see just how miserable the enemy tank's lives look. I played this mode for several hours and only lost a handful of times, and what I really wanted to find out is how the community would react to a very oppressive 6v6 style hero. You see, we forget a time where you were stuck at a choke, unable to get past due to the spam and tank control of the enemy. A character like Junkrat, or oftentimes Pharah, would break these multi-tank formats, because a funny thing that I realized when playing up against two tanks is that these characters that maybe are weaker to a squishy pick, a duelist kind of clearing them out or drawing attention, expecting to need two tanks to ram their face through a choke into a barrage of spam, just gives the spam character a lot of control over the match. And while, yeah, the tanking cooldowns are hard to get through, the windows of exploitability when they don't have their cooldowns up leaves for Junkrat's massive projectiles and huge damage spikes to easily nuke them down, as well as anything else that wants to step up. Of course, it's a take like this that the streamer class of the game, all of the top 500 players, pros, laugh at me for stating, because they are only concerned about the Sojourns, Tracers, and Widowmakers of the world. But I think the thing that will become painfully obvious to the entire community is that there has been one person who has been advocating advice on the format for the perspective of the average player who doesn't play at top 500, and the rest of the conversation looks down on those players with a get good style attitude. As in, whatever degenerate gameplay you're going to be stuck with the format they want for the highest peak competitive Overwatch that they master playing the game 10 hours a day, the average player gets stuck at a choke, wondering how the hell to even engage into space or make use of their favorite characters. 6v6 is not the format that does that, or any version of multi-tank, essentially, because the basis of multi-tank requires pathing synergy. The single gigatanks of 5v5 allows for flexibility from every individual player. What's crazy is, like, imagine this, okay? A lot of the games I played in my rampage through this open queue format, dominating tanks, laughing all the way to the bank, a lot of times the enemy tanks were trying to synergize. They're just bad. They're trying to step up into the tank thing, getting mowed down by Big Shack, skiddity scat scat boom. The extra layers of gameplay that get introduced into a more complex format is only understood by a few hundred players of our player base. There's legit quick maths you have to do to understand, do we have more tank shield break pressure than they do? How do we go in together? Can we go in together? 3, 2, 1, go. Everyone moves in, takes space in concert, or you all fall, okay? What a laughable version of this game. And the only way to make the gameplay not degenerate is to deliberately unbalance it. You can't have a balanced version that feels playable in multi-tank or 6v6. The reason is because of the disproportionate value of characters being polarized, as in they hard carry or hard throw. You just sort of have to allow ones that people kind of like to be the best. Otherwise, the performance is way too extreme, which is the opposite of the 6v6 arguments, right? The arguments are tank is more fun, it will be more popular, the queue times will be better than they were in 6 years of Overwatch 1. It's easier to balance. Clearly not true. The opposite is true unless you don't understand what the word balance even means. 5v5 promotes a skill-based skill curve to the performance of heroes, whereas 6v6 promotes an RPG team comp builder just to get the baseline entry into the playability of the game. Which game do we want to be playing? The one that can be dominated by skill shot and skill expression heroes, or the one that is unplayable unless you have the right pieces to engage with the enemy's comp, requiring your teammates to all work together? Teams not working together is an issue in Overwatch 2 5v5, but it's a nightmare to witness in these multi-tank formats because the tanks don't have any range, right? So as I'm like shelling them from afar as Junkrat, I'm entirely safe because they have to transition past my tank line, which might even hard counter theirs or not. Honestly, it didn't matter to me what any tank picked, just about. Because me as Junk, I either won a duel or pressured the tank line so much that my tanks just simply had more space. You're stuck on a hero that has limited skill expression. Now granted, the Overwatch 2 characters, there are more Junker Queens and Doomfists, which are kind of similar to the skill expression of like a Tracer, but still, they have the bigger hitboxes, they have limited range, they often need more resources, don't play off on their own as well. It's not really the same. I really tried to play this mode looking to be optimistic, and I will say that it probably is a better version of open queue, but it doesn't make me at all excited for any competitive viability of 6v6, seeing as I already see exactly what I knew I'd see, which is disparate expectations of what the performance of different heroes does. The top players blame the mode for failing because tanks are still too strong. Meanwhile, in all of the gameplay that I played, I saw tank players writhing in pain, getting steamrolled over, hardly ever picking synergistic tanks, and even when they did, I'm not so sure that they successfully utilized the kits to an interesting potential whatsoever. Further, while the trailer for Overwatch Classic seems enamored with multiple tank ults on the field, I'd say that's probably one of my least favorite aspects of multi-tank. The truth is, the counter-pick MOBA gameplay gets way more severe once you start adding more tanks. And it's a combination of things. Tank synergy and defenses can block out a lot of the cast. For example, if the enemy really wanted to deny me, they could go Sigma Diva, and a Junkrat style pick is hard countered, basically. Whereas in 5v5, that's harder to be the case. I'd say Gigabuffed Diva is probably the closest character that I would say I would hard want to avoid playing Junk, but lots of other tanks, I more or less can still do my job if I take the proper lanes and win my duels. That's something I like about 5v5. But then on top of it, the tank ults are so freaking powerful that you kind of auto-win those tank ult fights, which, yes, feels like that's the case in 5v5 because you have limited defenses to begin with. But once you have two tank ults, the tank gap and tank skill curve just gets exponentially more punishing. And the thing that was most evident from watching the tank players on either my or the enemy's team, nobody knows how to play this role. Right? If we let the conversation about tank gameplay only reside in the voices of the few top 100 players that actually know how to play tank to a high level, we forget about the vast majority of players that just want to jump in the front line and smash some abilities to feel tanky. This idea that players are going to love the idea of tanks getting steamrolled over if they misplay is a joke. Only the top players like this, because yes, it does add for extreme skill curve. It also leads to punishingly annoying gameplay for, I'm going to say, the bottom 99%. There's no way that the average tank player is going to like feeling far squishier, needing tank synergy to survive and even exist, where lots of matches are auto losses because your team comp doesn't really fight theirs. Oddly enough, in a strange way, I'm almost more excited for like a flex queue type format or a more open queue type format rather than role queue 6v6. Because of the counter-picking nature of how the tank synergies work against each other, you think you're solving the problem by having a quote off tank that can help you, but actually you exacerbate the problem, making it twice as easy or twice as powerful to counter-pick your tank line. And unlike open queue, you can't swap off tank, right? Like the counter might be just to not pick a tank. The thing that I noticed is even in the 5v5 flex open queue format, it felt a lot easier to hide as a player. There's a lot of players that could just kind of AFK, and that gets even more amplified when we move to 6v6 because the frontline fight can so auto-win that supports especially, but even some DPS players are just along for the ride while we spectate our comp beat theirs. These more MOBA versions of Overwatch, guys, turns Overwatch into an auto-battler, and its proponents claim that 5v5 does that, but I think you're quickly going to realize that that's not true for the average player, because the average player in 5v5 can get space and hit shots. The average player in 6v6, half of their games are unplayable, and you need way more skill in order to overcome those comp mismatches, which the streamer class of our community has. They don't care about you. They go into those types of games and dominate anyway. Now, I will admit that due to the boom-bust nature of the game, perhaps the players find that more enjoyable overall, because like similar to a battle royale, where you don't really expect to win, sometimes having insurmountable odds is part of the charm of the game. So maybe this is me missing a trick all of these years, hating that idea and wanting competitive normalcy. Perhaps all along, the true light at the end of the tunnel was the chaos, was the guaranteed failure, because along with that meant that sometimes you'd have guaranteed success and you didn't have to be good or engage with the game or play your angles or worry about your cooldowns. You just sort of won. Maybe that's the gameplay people want out of multi-tank and Overwatch Classic. But that's not the arguments people make, right? That's not how they say it. They say it's the deeper format. They say it's obviously better. They say it makes your tank line more sensible, turning it into chess, not checkers. But all it takes is looking at that gameplay footage from Spylo's video where players can't get out of a choke because their tank line sucks. Remember, you're not playing chess or checkers. You're flipping the Monopoly board over because it's so annoying. The one benefit I can give this mode is because it's 5v5, even with multi-tank, there's still more room to move on the map. So the downsides of multi-tank aren't as bad. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like. And don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.